you purchased my salvation. You brought me in another season. You will love me before creation could. And my love just confirmed when we...
Hello, welcome back, folks. My name is Bruce. This is part 2 of our lesson number 12, which is entitled God's Gracious Rewards. And if you all remember from part 1, we ended with the owner going out and finding different guys to come in and help with the harvest. And we're at the end of the day, at the end of part 1. And as we begin part 2, we're going to see how he decided to pay those that came in and did some work for him. And as we jump right into verse 9, and prayerfully everyone is doing well, and prayerfully this lesson part 2 it can come out plain, or excuse me, I can make it plain, and you all can put the practical points into your daily lives. And as we begin in verse 9, and when they came that were hired about the 11th hour, they received every man a penny. So if you remember from part 1, the very first group that he went out and got with at about 6 o'clock in the morning, they had all agreed on a set wage for the day's work. And if you remember, it was a penny, or a denarius, excuse me. And so those workers that came after that first group, they were not given or they were not promised a set wage. They were only told that they would be given whatsoever was right. And so when you had those workers that came in at 5 o'clock, right, they only worked an hour, right? They were just happy just to find work, and they put in their work for an hour, and they expected to receive, just a fraction of that. And for the homeowner to tell his steward to give those people first a full day's pay, well, you have to imagine that type of generosity. You don't see that often. Again, I've been on my job for 20 plus years. There's never been a scenario where the owners of our company would allow someone to come in, and I'm not talking about someone who had vacation time. They wouldn't allow someone to come in, work one day, and get paid for the whole week. That just doesn't happen. And I don't imagine on all of you all's jobs, you have similar situations where your bosses are not going to pay people for work or for time that they didn't spend working, right? But this individual was gracious enough to give those men who came and only worked for 1 hour a full penny. Verse 10. But when the first came, they supposed that they should have received more, and they likewise received every man a penny. So now the first group that came in at 6 has been working hard all day. They've been in the sun all day. They've been doing their thing. They're looking at the situation and they're like, well, surely, we're going to get more than what we agreed upon, because if he's giving these guys who only worked an hour a full day's pay, he's essentially putting them on our level, right? So if he's going to put them on our level, then obviously that means that he must have something a little bit extra for us, right? And again, we've talked about this in part 1, where we worry about what the next person is getting, right? We want to make sure that they don't get more than what they deserve. So see that first group, we're looking at that last group as if they didn't deserve what they got, instead of being happy, that they were going to be able to feed their family. Because let's be honest, had he paid them what they deserved, it would have been a fraction of a penny, right? You don't know how you can get lower than a penny, but it's a fraction of that. And that was going to be difficult for those men, right? Especially if they had families, to go back and buy food for them. So again, for them to receive that full pay like that, cause those other guys to think, okay, all right, we're going to get more than what we agreed upon. And we talked about that also in part 1, where when you agree to a contract and you agree to terms, well, employers, should make sure that they pay what they're supposed to pay, and an employee is supposed to make sure that he gives what he's supposed to give. Verse 11, and when they had received it, they murmured against the good men of the house. So now they've gotten their penny, and mind you, they got their penny last, right? So even though they were the first ones to go into work, they were the last ones to get paid. And they're sitting back and they're watching these other guys get paid what they were getting paid or what they were promised to be paid. And once they receive their pay, right, now they're upset. Now they're looking at the owner of the home, the vineyard owner, and they're looking at him like, oh, what's up, bro? Like this is all we're gonna get, right? And again, you know, if you take it to today, it's no different, right? Sometimes you get your check and you look at it and you're like, man, this is all I got. You know, all the work that I put in this week, and you know, some of you all work on jobs where, you know, some people don't pull the same amount of weight, and it can be difficult sometimes when you get what you're supposed to get, and then you look over and someone who didn't put in half the work that you did also got the same thing. It's human nature. And it's funny, again, we talked about this also in part one, where people want to control other people's money, right? It wasn't enough that this man decided to be gracious to that last group, but the first group was upset again that this man chose to spend his money the way he wanted to spend his money. Verse 12, saying these last have wrought. Saying, these last have wrought but 1 hour, but thou hast made them equal unto us, which have borne the burden of the heat of the day. Now, listen, you know, on the surface, right? They have they have a legit complaint, right? From a human perspective, right? But if you look at it from a contractual standpoint, in the beginning of the day, they agreed upon a set wage. The man met the set wage, right? He gave them what they agreed upon. Now, you can say they were victims of circumstance, right? The fact that they had to work all day for the same thing that someone only had to work an hour to get. Or you could say, well, that last group, well, they were blessed because, again, they were allowed to work even for a short amount of time, and yet they got the same reward. Again, taking it back to the kingdom of heaven, again, no matter when you come in, right, everyone has the same reward, right? Now, there may be different gifts or different levels of gifts for people when they get to heaven, but the reward of spending eternity with God is the same for everybody. Verse 13, but he answered one of them and said, friend, I do thee no wrong. Didst not thou agree with me for a penny? So now this homeowner, he's taking one of these guys to the side and he's like, well, hold on now. And you love how he responds, right? Friend, right? Because he could have got mad and was like, you know, blah, blah, blah. Y'all get off my land. I gave you what I gave you, and that's what it is. But he pulled him to the side and he said, friend, hold on now. I did thee no wrong, right? We are men. We all agreed upon the ways that you all received, right? And when you talk sensibly to people, right, you go a lot farther in life. I know for myself, you know, there's a tendency sometimes to speak rashly, right? Whether that's intended or unintended, but people respond differently based on how you come to them, right? How you approach the situation, right? If you come at them with anger, well, you're going to get anger in return, right? And so these men, right? These men are upset that they feel like they should get more than what they got. Now, if he would have, you know, provoked them, it could have been a bad situation, right? But he pulled one to the side and spoke calmly and rationally to him, and again, sense, facts. Here's the facts. The facts of the matter is we agreed upon this wage. You all got paid what you all got paid. You all got paid what you agreed upon. I don't really see the problem here. Practical point that goes with verses 9 through 13. Again, God's rewards are not based on the outward superficial standards by which people often judge one another. He looks on the heart. Again, God's rewards are not based on the outward superficial standards by which people often judge one another. He looks on the heart. We've talked about this numerous times in our classes, right? You know, you can say all manner of things, right? But what's in here is what's going to show. What's in here is what's going to come out, right? Again, you know, people hide behind masks. You know, people say things that they don't truly mean. But what's here is what's really important. As we look at verse 14, take that thine is, and go thy way. I will give unto the last, even unto thee. So listen, he's like, listen, you know, instead of you sitting here arguing with me about what we already agreed upon and what you got, right? Why don't you go ahead on and take what you got and go on about your way? Because again, this is mine. And technically, I don't have to explain to you why I did what I did, right? Again, like we talked about before, when it's your money, you can spend it how you want to spend it. No one has the right to tell you what to do with your money that you work for, right? Verse 15, is it not lawful for me to do what I will with my own? Is thine eye evil because I am good? Again, you know, again, as a lot of you all know, you know, no one is going to tell you how to spend your money. If you want to spend your money on a certain thing, no one's going to be able to talk you out of that, right? And he looked at this guy and he said, listen, is thine eye evil? Basically, are you jealous, right? Are you jealous of the fact that that man got the same amount that you got? Because why can't you celebrate, or why can't you rejoice in the fact that, you know, he's going to be able to take care of his family, or you know, he's going to be able to find a place to sleep, or whatever he's going to do with that penny? Why are you sitting here wasting time grumbling about what I do with my money? Practical point number 5 that covers 14 and 15. When we truly grasp the fact that all the blessings we enjoy are gifts of God's grace, there will be less place for envy. Again, when we truly grasp the fact that all the blessings we enjoy are gifts of God's grace, there will be less place for envy. Again, every good thing you have comes from God, right? And again, he's sovereign. He can do whatever he wants to with his gifts, right? He can open up the windows of heaven and rain down blessings on whoever he chooses, right? And it doesn't have to make sense to us, right? You just understand that there's no point in me looking at them and being jealous of what they got. Again, as we said earlier, what God has for you is for you, right? When your brother or sister is blessed beyond measure, you should celebrate with them, right? No different than when they're going through hard times or when they're grieving, you are there to lend your shoulder, right? The same energy that you use when God is blessing them. Stand up and be happy for them. Don't be envious and jealous of them. Don't let your eye trick you. Again, is thine eye evil? Again, a lot of times we see things, right? We see things and it elicits feelings in our bodies, right? And it takes us down a path that, again, you may not want to go down, right? But if you allow for those thoughts and those feelings to take root in your mind and in your soul, well, who knows what place you're going to end up in. Verse 16. So the last shall be first, and the first last. For many are called, but few are chosen. And so now, you know, Jesus is closing out, you know, the parable, and he's explaining to, you know, his disciples. It's like, listen, there's a lot of people who are prominent now, right? A lot of people who have standing now, right, that are not going to have that same standing on the other side. And there's people who are looked up or not, or looked down upon, right? Who are not given status, who are going to be given status in heaven, right? Because again, many are called, but few are chosen. Listen, everyone everyone can receive the call of the gospel. Everyone can hear the gospel, but not everyone is going to accept it, right? Not everyone is going to say yes to salvation through Jesus. It is unfortunate. We are all, as Christians, going to work very hard to reach out to these people, but some of them, despite our best efforts, are going to reject it, right? The practical point that covers verse 16, it is senseless to follow the world's self-centered ways. They do not reflect the values of God. Again, it is senseless to follow the world's self-centered ways. They do not reflect the values of God. And you can see that play out in the news and in and around all of you all's communities, right? You just see, again, attack, division, or you're trying to force things on people and you're not taking into account how they feel. It's just, you are this and that's that. And we try to counsel people for having opinions or stating what they believe. Unfortunately, that's the world we live in. But thankfully, as Christians, listen, let them do what they want to do. Stand on what you stand on, right? You can do everything in love, but stand on what you stand on. As we go back up into verse 9, payment to the final shift. When the owner had hired them, he had not quoted them a particular wage. He told them only that they would receive whatever was right. No doubt they had prepared to receive about 1/12 of a denarius, because that would be the proportional rate for their labor. Remember, they only work for an hour. The small amount would be better than nothing at all, but it would hardly provide an adequate meal for an individual and would certainly not be sufficient for an entire family, right? As we said. When the last shift of workers came to the steward, they were amazed at the wage that they received. The owner had authorized them to get a full day's wage, a denarius. This was the same amount that those who had worked all day had contracted to receive. The full denarius was 12 times what they expected or deserved. Again, this man was gracious. Again, just like God is gracious, right? We don't deserve what we get, and yet God still blesses us. Again, no different than when we look at people who are, let's say, in the world, right? They're not saved, they're not born again, but yet they are thriving, all right? God can bless whoever he wants to bless. The owner had compensated them according to what they had earned. The ample payment to the lesser shifts demonstrated his generosity. It was a measure of his grace and kindness to those who were undeserving. As we look at inflated expectations, which covers verse 10, the parable turns from the payment of the last shift of workers to the payment of the first shift of workers. They knew what the group had worked. They knew that what the group had worked for, They knew what the group that had worked for only 1 hour had received. As they came before the steward, they reasoned that they would certainly receive more than 1 denarius. After all, it was only just that those who had labored all day should be paid more than those who had worked for just 1 hour. So again, they thought that, hey, listen, we've been here all day. We're the only ones that deserve a full pay, not them. No, they don't deserve a full pay. Give them a fraction. The order of the payment was important. If the first workers had been paid first, they would not have had time to develop the expectation of more pay for themselves. Possibly the first felt their vanity wounded by being paid after the others. They used their waiting time in considering their own superiority to the latecomers. If the last shift had been surprised to get a full denarius, the first shift was stunned by receiving the same amount. The steward gave them exactly what they had agreed to as a wage, no less, no more. Although in their own minds they supposed that they would receive more than the wages that they had agreed to, that was not in fact the case. Their wage was the same as that of all the other workers, the 1 denarius for which they had contracted. As we look at grumbling, which covers 11 and 12, even though the first group of laborers had received exactly what they had agreed to for their wage, they began to grumble. Again, ain't that just like humans, right? Their hopes for sudden affluence had been squelched as quickly as they had risen, leaving the men angry and resentful. Right? One or more of the men spoke up to their employer, complaining that he had not been fair. By paying those who had just worked 1 hour the same wage as those who had labored all day, the owner had made the two groups equal. To compound the supposed injustice, the first group had toiled throughout the heat of the day, but the last group had begun and ended their work in the cooler evening breeze. The first group's work had been much harder and more arduous than what the last shift had endured, which we can all agree. Their complaint had nothing to do with whether they had been paid an honest day's wage for an honest day's work. It centered totally on the fact that someone else had done less than they and had been paid the same. From a human perspective, it does not seem fair. Why should those who spent 12 hours working hard in the sun be paid no more than those who had worked only an hour in the late afternoon, right? Instead of rejoicing for the others, they insisted that those who worked just 1 hour had no right to be compensated as the owner determined. So again, we don't want you to spend your money how you want to spend your money. Choice of grace covers verses 13 through 14. The owner was not intimidated by the murmuring of the laborers. On one hand, he was not angry with them either. His answer to them centered upon the basic facts and principles that they needed to digest. Apparently, the owner took one of the first shift workers aside to talk with him. He addressed him as friend, a term that implied a kind response rather than an angry retort. Right? The charge that the workers had made against the owner was of injustice. So he began at that point. As he talked to the laborer, he stated firmly, I do thee no wrong, verse 13. The first workers had agreed to work in the vineyard for a penny or denarius. That was precisely what they had been paid. This was not a case of an unjust owner failing to pay the contracted wage. Again, it's not like he was holding their money back. It wasn't like he lied about what he was going to give them. He gave them what they agreed upon. Because they had received the complete wage to which they had agreed, their charge of injustice could not be sustained. The owner had not defrauded them at all. He urged the worker to take his denarius and go his way rather than complain about it. Verse 13 is the key to understanding the parable. The original workers had agreed to a certain amount, everyone, and were satisfied to work for that amount when they were hired. The householder had lived up to his agreement with them. The later workers had not agreed to any set amount. They simply trusted the householder, to give them what is right. Their faith in the man had been generously rewarded. Again, just like your faith in God will generously be rewarded. Giving generous wages to the other workers was his decision alone. This parable is intended to teach one simple truth, that man's reward will not be according to the length of his service, but according to his fidelity to the opportunity which is given to him, As we look at challenge to the gratitude, which covers 15 and 16, the first workers spoke in terms of justice, but the owner spoke in terms of grace. His resources belonged to him, and he had the right to disperse them as he pleased. As the owner in his goodness chose to give to some workers more than what they deserved, this was his choice to make. Right? Again, this is my money. The employer asked the disgruntled man, "Is thine eye evil because I am good?" Verse 15. The Hebrews used the word evil when applied to the eye to denote one envious and malicious. Deuteronomy 15:9 and Proverbs 23:6. The eye is called evil in such cases because envy and malice show themselves directly in the eye. Remember what we said, you see things with your eye and you get immediately, sometimes you get jealous. In essence, he asked whether they were responding with jealousy to his kindness. Of course, they were doing just that. By their grumbling, the first workers were in effect saying that the owner was wrong for showing grace to others, right? And again, even as Christians, sometimes you look upon and you look at certain situations and, you know, you want God to rain down vengeance, and yet God rains down grace, right? In reality, they themselves were at fault. The fact that the last shift received the full denarius, just as the first shift did, caused the first shift workers to become jealous. They had received all they had agreed to, but they felt that others who came later did not deserve to get the same payment. By begrudging the grace shown to others, the laborers demonstrated a selfish, evil attitude that contrasted the heart of the owner. Jesus concluded the parable with the important lesson the story illustrated. So the last shall be first, and the first last. Verse 16. Peter had just asked what the disciples could expect to receive as compensation for forsaking all and following Jesus, for chapter 19, verse 27. This parable may have been intended to reinforce Jesus' assurances that we can trust him to be abundant in blessings, providing for us far more than we could possibly deserve. Verses 28 through 30 of chapter 19. The parable reminded the disciples that while there is reward for faithful service to God, they must not think about it in strictly human terms. Rather, God gives freely according to his grace. In his kingdom, the Lord blesses according to his pleasure, not necessarily according to what we humans think. Some think this parable speaks of the way that people come to God at different stages of their life. They may come at the beginning of their life, in their youth, in adulthood, in old age, or at the very end. Others think it refers to how the gospel first dawned with John the Baptist, then the preaching of Jesus, then the preaching at Pentecost, then to the Jews, and finally to the Gentiles. It is best understood as a parable about grace and reward. The disciples should expect to be rewarded, but they should not be surprised if, when rewards are distributed, God will reward others in unexpected ways. The last shall be first, the first last. Again, this is the essence of God's grace when he rewards and blesses man according to his will and pleasure, not necessarily according to what men deserve. The system of law is easy to figure out, everyone. You get what you deserve. The system of grace, however, everyone, is foreign to us. God deals with us according to who he is, not according to who we are. Because think about it. Again, if he gives us what we deserve, if he truly gives us what we deserve, well, you know what it is. It is important to see that the homeowner did not treat anyone unfairly. Though he was more gracious to some than others, we can be assured that God will never, ever be unfair to us. Though he may, for his own purpose and pleasure, bestow greater blessing on someone else who seems less deserving. The point isn't that all have the same reward. The point isn't that all have the same reward, though all God's people do go to the same heaven, where they will have a reward in different measure. The point is that God rewards on the principle of grace, and that we should therefore expect surprises. He will never be less than fair as pleases him. God's grace always operates righteously. This parable is not a perfect illustration of God's grace because the principle of working and deserving is involved. The grace of God does not give us more blessing than we deserve. It gives blessing to us completely apart from the principle of deserving. Because again, you don't deserve anything. All right. Living under grace is sort of a two-edged sword. Under grace, we can't come to God complaining, don't I deserve better than this? Right? And I know some of us have made that statement. Because God will reply, does this mean that you really want me to give you what you deserve? Grace should be especially manifested in our service. It is of grace, not works. All of our service is due to God. It belongs to him. The ability to serve God, everyone, is a gift of his grace. The call to serve God is the gift of his grace. Every opportunity to serve is a gift of his grace. Being in the right state of mind to do the Lord's work is a gift of grace. And I want to put a pin right here very fast just for everyone's mental, right? It's very, very important that you continue to pray over your mind, that you continue to seek counseling, with your pastors and your leaders, your church family, and also with professionals, right? Because again, your mental health is extremely important, and I pray that no one takes it for granted. Successful service to God is a gift of his service, as a gift of his grace, excuse me. For many be called, but few chosen. This was said in context of this illustration of grace. Jesus emphasized that both the calling and the choosing of God is based on his grace, especially his choosing. Again, many are called, but few are chosen. As we look at real life applications and we conclude the lesson, it has been said that the tragedy of the harvest field is that the laborers are using their scythes on each other instead of focusing on the many lost who need to hear of salvation in Jesus Christ. Too many Christians, everyone, are busy trying to get the better of other believers, either in number of converts and salary or in other areas, right? You're competing, right? Jesus told the parable to show that God has the right to bless as he sees fit. Blessings from the Lord are always undeserved. So why should we feel resentment or jealousy when someone else gets a blessing we did not? Neither one of us deserved it. Again, neither one of us deserved it. Instead of feeling jealous, we must learn to rejoice in the blessing God gives to others. When a believer stands behind a wall of resentment when others receive God's blessings, he cuts himself off from the joy of sharing in that blessing. When we rejoice with those who rejoice, however, we share the blessing, for it brings glory to the Lord. God's ways are not our ways, everyone. Again, God's ways are not our ways. There are many things that God does that we do not understand. We should remember that God is sovereign and gracious. He is just and faithful in keeping his promises. He also is a gracious rewarder of those who put their trust in him. As Christians, it is not our place to murmur at God's judgment or to be envious of those who seem to be more blessed than ourselves. We should worship our sovereign God and trust him to always do what is right. Because again, you can put your faith and trust in him and know that everything is going to be all right. And as we're drawing this lesson to a close, prayerfully, you watch part 1 and part 2, and you've been able to put these two together, and hopefully it came out plain. Prayerfully, you put all of these practical points into use in your daily lives. And you all remember, again, as Christians, it's not our place to worry about what the next person gets. It's not our place to be mad or upset when someone uses their resources how they want to use them. Right? It's not our place to get mad at God if we see someone who we don't like or someone who we think doesn't deserve shining, right? You rejoice and praise God for that person being blessed, right? Again, we have to be different, right? We can't be like the world, right? The world is like those first group of workers, right? The ones that don't feel like everyone that came after us should get what we got, right? As Christians, we should want as many people as we can get to come in and enjoy the rewards and the blessings and what God has for all of those who accept. And so as we end the lesson, again, prayerfully you all have a great weekend. Prayerfully, you enjoy time spent with your family and friends. Be safe, everyone. Please be safe. It is still hot out there. Again, to the young people, You completed, and here in my county anyway, they've completed their first day or first week of school. The young men are out there playing sports, and young ladies are out there playing sports. Again, you all be safe this year. As we normally close out, I want to send this invitation to those who have not accepted Christ, those who do not know the pardoning of their sins. And again, I just want to remind you that salvation is easy, right? It is not something that is difficult. It's not something that's hard, right? It's as simple as admit that you have sinned, right? All of us are sinners. All have sinned and fall short of the glory of God. Right? Romans 3:23, right? Believe God's promise. For God so loved the world that he gave his only son, that whosoever believeth in him shall not perish, but have everlasting life. John 3:16, right? Again, believe that what God has, that what he, again, just like with the homeowner, right? I'm not promising you anything, but you can believe that I'm going to take care of you at the end of the day, right? Confess Jesus is Lord. If you confess with your mouth Jesus is Lord and believe in your heart that God raised him from the dead, you will be saved. For it is with your heart that you believe and are justified, and it is with your mouth that you profess your faith and are saved. As scripture says, anyone who believes in him will never be put to shame. Listen, if you've prayed that prayer, if you said those verses, if you've opened yourself up, listen, you're saved, right? Heaven is rejoicing over you right now. The angels in heaven are rejoicing. Here at JMG, we are rejoicing, right? We love to see those who are on a path of darkness to come to the light. We love to see those who were standing around who didn't have any work, right, to get an opportunity to come into the field and take on some of the load, right? Find you a Bible-believing church, a man or woman of God who preaches the word of God. Right? Plug in with the brothers and sisters of that ministry and allow for them to gird you up. Allow for them to help you on this path. Right? Again, develop a strong prayer life. Develop a strong reading, a Bible study life. Right? And again, allow the Lord to work inwardly to transform you and to make you into who he had for you from the very beginning. Right? And so again, I look forward to seeing you all back next week. Hopefully again that you all enjoy your weekend as we look at our very last lesson of our summer quarter. It's been an awesome quarter, right? And we're now at the last lesson, which is which deals with Jesus' parable of the Pharisee and the tax collector from Luke 18:9 through 14. And I know some of you all are familiar with that parable, where, you know, one individual was extremely humble and the other individual wanted to be very pious and wanted to make a show of it, right? And so prayerfully you all will come back and join us for that lesson on next week. But again, please enjoy your weekend. Please be safe. I look forward to seeing you all back on the corner. Until then, everyone, God bless.